WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and Baltimore Positive. We are back on the beat here and certainly watching some football. Waiting for the end of this baseball thing. I'm rooting against both of these teams. But in the meantime, the Ravens do play once a week. They're going to play twice 2 weeks from now as well, making their way home, which is a little unusual these days. They put a lot of road games. The Phoenix Cardinals of Arizona were the latest victims along the trail of how can we be a Super Bowl contender but not play like it every week? Luke Jones joins us now. We've seen this record before, certainly in the NFL. Not an easy thing to go out to the West Coast and win games. A 4 o'clock thing. I think Michael Pierce admitted that he woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning, had to sit there and twiddle his thumbs. I'm familiar with what that feels like on a West Coast trip, being in and out for 48 hours as well. Luke, I don't want to say they play like they sleptwalk. I think we're all looking for this better version of them that we've seen one time, as I pointed out last week. Once you see it once, you believe you can see it not consistently because it's the NFL and the other team's trying hard, but at least being able to put things together. That was an effort that almost got them blown up by a 1-6 team on the West Coast. We've seen this with Pittsburgh. We've seen it with Indianapolis. It was a little bit troublesome. I'm not worried about them in the big picture of winning football games because they won, but the fact that they're going through some adversity, they're learning some lessons here, are they not?
Yeah, I really struggle with this football game because I think through the first 50 minutes, the narrative and so many fans bristle at that term narrative. When I say narrative, just if you told me to tell the story of the game, what
What's the first thing
happened,
we're talking about? It's the
right,
narrative, right? Yeah.
right. But the first 50 minutes of the game, what we saw and how it played out does not at all match what the final score was, right? I mean, the first 50 minutes of the game was the defense, which has been the much more consistent side of the football through the first half of the season, as we're now basically at the halfway point, 8 games in a 17-game schedule. And the offense, after this seemingly having this breakthrough a week ago against Detroit, looked more like the offense that we've seen for the previous 6 games of the season, where it looked really, it's looked good at times, but then it bogs down. There are times where they run the ball well, and there's other times they don't run the ball well or don't even try to run the ball all that much. There are times where the passing game looks really, really good. It didn't look so good on Sunday. And so it was really a game that looked like it was going to be okay. Well, the defense leads the way again. Michael Pierce with this great performance, which he certainly played great. But then you see the last 10 minutes of the game, and the defense, it was a bit too much to chalk up just to be in garbage time. Let's be clear. From the moment the Ravens took a 14-7 lead at late in the first half, I never really felt like the game was remotely in doubt from that point on. I really didn't. But
You just want to see him clean it up and get on the plane and come home, right?
right.
I mean, even if Clowney falls on the football, we're talking about a different game here. I mean, playing pussyfoot around with them for 4.5 minutes at the end of the game, letting them onside kick, and then letting them go down the field and score. Shut the door, close the game. Be a 6-2 team beating a 1-7 team. Be that team.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's a reminder of just how weird the NFL is. Look, for every statement game like the Ravens made last week, there's a lot of weird stuff that goes on. And Sunday was a perfect example of that. I mean, who would have figured the lousy Denver Broncos defense holds Kansas City to 9 points? And the Chiefs had one loss all year until Sunday's game. And I get it was cold. Mahomes was sick. Was added to the injury report over the weekend. However you want to
well, every third week, the Cowboys
weird.
look like they're going to win the Super Bowl. We were at the Star 2 weeks ago, and they got their ass kicked the night before in San Francisco. So, bad losses are one thing. Just having a good performance, having a solid 60 minutes over the halfway point of the season, we can see this is a good football team. They're 6-2. We can see all the potential. We can see all the stars and the star makers and the guys with big contracts and the guys whose names have been lit up on Broadway, OBJ in 3 letters, and think we've got something here. And then you see them do that against the Lions, and you're like, well, now we know how good they can be. I don't measure them on Halloween. It's an escape game. And to me, I've watched the league for, I was watching those Houston Oilers jerseys, thinking about Dan Pastorini in 1973 on Sunday. But I've been watching the game a long, long time, half a century. I've never missed a weekend of football or games, and this isn't uncommon that they would play this way, but it is disappointing. And I think they get on the plane and they're on the way back home. We won, but they also we had stuff to clean up. I've never
Yeah.
heard Harbaugh start a post game press conference by saying we weren't great. That was weird. I would have liked to. That was a weird version of John. He was choking before he came to the podium. I don't know what happened, but it was like we got kayfabe John instead of ball coach John for the press conference. It was like, do you think this is the preseason sit down when nobody knows about? Because it was just weird. But he even admitted that they didn't look like Lamar didn't show the vibe of a victorious quarter. So that's good because I think they know they can't play like that and beat Cincinnati 2 weeks from now, the way Cincinnati's playing.
Yeah, I mean, no question about it. Again, it's just I struggle with this game because I don't think there was anything about it that strikes this major alarm or panic button or anything like that. I mean, we've seen this offense play like this. This is who they are until they start stacking dominant offensive. The defense has largely been dominant this year, and they weren't over the last 10 minutes. But I'm going to give Mike McDonald's group the benefit of the doubt because they have played at an elite level just about every single week. I mean, even the games that they lost, it's not as though they were awful against Indianapolis. It's not as though they were awful. They were great against Pittsburgh, except for one play, basically, and that cost them the football game because their offense was so lousy in
Am
that
I
game
right
and
in saying they
dropping
played
passes.
6 backup quarterbacks or 5?
So Houston rookie quarterback. They played Joe Burrow on one leg, who certainly looked way better in San
And
Francisco this
Jared Goff.
past
So
week.
they've had 3 starters.
Yeah, Indy backup quarterback. Although Gardner Minshew versus a rookie quarterback, we can kind of debate that. They clearly haven't played an imposing slate of quarterbacks. But as I noted at BaltimorePositive.com this past week, Nestor, go back and look at the first half of the 2000 season. Ravens weren't playing a ton of great quarterbacks that year, even for a historic defense. So your schedule is what it is, right? You can't control who you're playing. So for me, in the big picture sense, this defense has earned every benefit of the doubt. They've played at a very high level. They've been much more consistent than the offense has been, where the offense, it's been, their success has been more fleeting. Those times where they've looked dominant or championship caliber, certainly much more fleeting. But again, as you pointed out, it's a weird trip. You're out in the desert. It's only the second time in the last 20 years they played out there, which is just kind of weird when you think of the scheduling quirk leading to that.
I had to think about that because I did the Sun Devil Stadium game
Yeah.
many years ago where Peter Boulware made the big play at the end of the game. I was at that game. It was like 16-13. But my cousin was in high school. It was 1999 or 2. It was the Super Bowl year, wasn't it?
Yeah, they played out there
Super Bowl year,
late
2000.
late in 2000, and
And then
in
we
2000,
went out there and got our ass kicked in a Monday night game when my wife was dying, at a game I never should have gone to in 2015. I can tell you exactly when that game was. It was in October 2015. I remember getting on the plane. One of the biggest mistakes I ever made in my life was going to cover that football game. And I ran into Neil Schoen and Jonathan Kane in the elevator on the way out from Journey because they played the pregame. By the way, I missed Sugar Hill Gang on Sunday. Damn. If I'd have known that, I would have gone down from Vegas for that,
right. They also played there in 2003. That was a Chris McAllister pick six where he got flagged for taunting. I remember that. But yeah, they haven't been out there. So it's a sleepy trip. It's a weird, on TV. I don't know how it came across on your television, the TV broadcast. It seemed like there were a decent number of Ravens fans there, but they didn't have a ton to cheer about because we didn't get to see a whole lot of fireworks on offense. Lamar had the flip, the flip pass that was impressive, but he only took off a couple times, didn't run for much. They didn't throw for much. And it was really the defense that led the way for 50 minutes. But then you get to the final 10 minutes and you look at it and you look at the final score, and anyone who didn't watch the game on Sunday is saying what? Oh, wow, the Ravens offense played much better. And hey, their defense was a little bit off. And that really wasn't how the game played out until the final 7 or 8 minutes.
Or as I'm going to say to Christian Horton, Hollywood Casino this week, they didn't cover.
Yeah, well, yeah. And anytime you're talking about and I don't, me, I'm not a sports gambling guy, but you see a spread that gets up to 8.5, 9, 9.5 for a road team. Yeah, that's usually one you want to stay away from. And Sunday was a perfect example. And look, Was this really a game that felt like a one-score game most of the way? No, it didn't. But it's what it was, and I think we kind of look at the Ravens kind of like that team we were talking about going into the Detroit game, where I think universally you view them as a playoff team. I don't think there's any doubt about that, but at the same time, they have this reputation for not playing a complete 60 minutes. Some people call it they play with their food a little bit, however you want to characterize it, play down to the competition a little bit. It's hard to argue with it, with the way that some of these games have gone, where they've looked really good at times, and then other times it's, you're kind of asking, what was that? Why didn't you step on their neck? Why didn't you finish it off? And part of that is that's the nature of the NFL, especially in 2023, where every team in the AFC right now, we've got four teams at 6-2 in the AFC right now, and all four of those teams you can point to and say, oh, they didn't like how they played in those games, or they went through a little stretch where they didn't look as good. Buffalo's a great example of this. Cincinnati's a great example of this. But you look at this conference and it feels as wide open as it can feel, acknowledging Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City and what they've done over the last 3 or 4 years. So, in that sense, the Ravens are in, they're in perfect position. Doesn't mean they're a perfect football team, but they're in perfect position as it pertains to the hierarchy in the AFC. But yeah, I mean, Sunday's game was one where they're up 3 scores and you're thinking, okay, put this thing away. And it's not the most impressive performance of the season, but it's what you wanted to do. But instead you get this choppy, weird, almost bizarre fourth quarter where everything that we saw over the course of 50 minutes, it kind of became the opposite at the end, where the defense faltered and the offense finally got the running game going at the end. So again, a weird game, but as I wrote at baltimorepositive.com, for every statement game that you see in the NFL, like the Ravens seemingly made a week ago, you're going to find a lot of weird games, a lot of weird results, and frankly, probably not all that consequential to what the ultimate story of the 2023 Baltimore Ravens is going to be.
All right. So the thing that I wrote about in my column is the fact that they're rounding. And by the way, the bye is really weird this year, right? Like, and their schedule with these West Coast games in London. Now that you're into it, you're like, all right, they're home for a while. They got 3 games, then they get a lot of rest after that Cincinnati game, and then they have a West Coast, a bye, then they play, and then they have the West Coast at Christmas time, and the bye being late, given their injuries and given the home cooking they're about to have, and the fact that they've had a weak schedule. They played backup quarterbacks. They won the most impressive game that they could win at home against the team that is coming off the other side of the NFC, thinking they're pretty good. The schedule's been fortunate for them in a lot of ways. And I think with their injuries early on in September, when they're out there running around without Humphrey, without Stanley, without Beckham, without Bateman, without Kyle Hamilton, without, with guys that were banged up earlier in the year, the thing that heartens me for them and their coaches and the organization to think that they can win a Super Bowl or put themselves they put themselves in a position now, as long as Lamar stays healthy. And we could have said that the last 2 years as well. I don't know why he's running draws, with a 9-point lead at the end of the game. I mean, it's like starting to run the ball then. It's like, this is exactly when you need Gus Edwards or just somebody else to not fumble the ball. But I look at their health and think, it's about as healthy as you can expect him to get. I mean, Marcus Williams, I don't even know if you call him a Raven. He's been off the field more than he's been on the field. I don't even it was like sort of like Ronnie Stanley a year ago. I don't think like, is he still on the team? Wake me when he's available. And that's okay. And the Dobbins thing, look, you were higher on him than I was, just in a general sense that he was going to be a 1,500 yard, bell cow kind of back, and they were going to give him the ball that much. And we're halfway through the season, and my prediction of them not throwing the ball very much is true, and not throwing it very well. And you and I will make that argument that if they threw it well, they throw it more. And when the running game goes away, when that down and distance piece on first down goes away, they struggle. But the problem that I had with the performance is, it's one thing to say in September we're rounding around, we didn't get our whole team on the field, we didn't play, and they played like that, and they won and lost at one point with Indianapolis and Pittsburgh, games that were sloppier. I'm seeing the full complement of players now in the middle of the season, allegedly healthy, and I think There's still some questions about some of the guys, Humphrey being one of them, as to whether they're fully healthy from a tackling standpoint, from uh, staying healthy the next 10 weeks. I know there are going to be more injuries. Like there's no doubt that
Right.
they're going to play a lot of games without the personnel they had on the field Sunday. They put it all together and got everybody on the plane. For that, I feel good. We haven't had any, knock on wood, catastrophic weird things. I've written 2 championship books. Both of them really, in the end, were about healthy. They have Stanley, if they have Humphrey, if they have Roquan, if they have Patrick Queen, if they have Kyle Hamilton, they have good players. It's nice that the Arthur Millettes take a piece. It's nice that Michael Pierce can dominate the line of scrimmage against kind of a bad offensive line. I mean, and a backup quarterback who didn't run for his life. I thought his best chance of winning the game would have been to run a little bit more. But the full complement of the teams they have everybody pretty much. I want to see that look more like last week. That's all. And I know the West Coast games. I even give them a pass on it just because it's a West Coast game against a 1-6 team in a sleepy old dome. I didn't expect a walkover. I didn't, but I just expected a little bit more crisp performance from the offense and a little bit more of, Lamar's got all his weapons. He's got his protection. They're running real practices now, not London, and they're winning football games, and they look like they did last week. I don't expect them to turn it on and turn it off. I don't think they're good enough for that. I think there's a lot of hard work that needs to be done here. And I think running the football still is, there's still another defensive coordinator over there doing what Arizona did, which is we're going to rush 3 and roll 8 back and see if Lamar can really throw the ball well or whether he's just going to run.
Well, it's always convenient to point that out and use that when they don't throw as well, but they threw the ball really well the week before. I hear what you're saying. I don't disagree. I think for me, it's not even that, okay, they didn't win. They didn't win 38-6. They didn't win 41-3. That's fine. Well, again, it's the NFL, right? I mean, look at some of the teams that we had been viewing as the absolute best in the NFL 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, and look where they are now. I mean, look at San Francisco, for example, where we viewed them to be at the beginning of October compared to where they are at the end of October, now going into the month of November. So it's a weird league in that way. We use that week to week term all the time, yet our analysis, and I don't mean, when I say our, I don't mean you and me, I mean in general, how national media, local media, whatever it might be, the analysis is that way too. A week ago, everyone was starting to hype that the Ravens were this unstoppable offense, and well, they looked pretty stoppable on Sunday for most of the game.
And
So
sometimes they stop themselves, and that's a big problem.
yeah, I'm with you. As far as the thing that concerns me, and again, I use the term concern relatively speaking because there wasn't a ton about this game that I'm alarmed over. Again, it was more weird than anything else, but I did want to see the offense stack a little bit more, build a little bit more on what they did a week ago, and we really didn't see that. And the reality is, let's be clear, this Arizona team, and look, I give them credit that they fought back in the fourth quarter. They made it a game. They got to the point where they're kicking onside kicks, but that's a really bad football team. And statistically,
Yeah,
it's
where's their
supported
Pro
that.
Bowler? Who's their best player?
I mean, it's some of their best players are on the sideline right now, injured. So we're looking at that. So I wanted to see the offense build a little bit more, and that doesn't mean I expected them to score 4 touchdowns in their first 4 drives like they did a week ago. But I did want to see a little more explosiveness, a little more consistency. You made the point about the passing game versus the running game. I mean, the reality is their passing game needs to be more consistent if they're going to make a deep January run. And also, yes, their running game needs to be more consistent if they want to win 3 or 4 games in a row come January.
Well, I
Look,
think
it's
it's
not.
all about the running game, bro, because the passing game ain't going to hold up for them. If they're going to try to pass, if they fall behind by 13 points in Buffalo on January 13th, they're going to lose. They need to run the ball. They need to run the ball. That's why this whole offseason of Odell and Bateman and we're going to throw for 6,000. How about you just how about just run the ball well and be in 2nd and 2 and 2nd and 3 and be in second and manageable, and
You
then
don't
you can
win
do
Super
whatever you
Bowls that
want.
way. You don't win Super Bowls that way. I mean, you can keep saying that. We've had the same conversation for 4 years now. You don't win Super Bowls that way. First of all, they are better throwing the ball than you give them credit for, and specifically, Lamar Jackson is way better throwing the ball than you give him credit for.
They just
But
don't throw a lot.
that's not the same thing. I continue to. we have the same conversation all the time. I mean, we
It's an
could go.
efficiency issue for
It's an
you, right?
efficiency issue, and
Yeah.
they're more efficient than you give them credit for. Is my point. And Lamar has been more efficient than you give him credit for. But that said, do I think that their passing game is at the level that it needs to be right now for them to make the kind of run in January that they're eyeing? No, it's not. And that's why they need to continue to improve in that way. And no, and I'm going to disagree with just saying they just need to run the ball. No. If that were the case, they would have never fired Greg Roman. And if that were the case, they would have continued to be 14-2 each of the last 3-4 years. But we saw
But
how
if
that
they
went.
don't run the ball, the rest of it goes to hell in a handbasket, and it's not nearly what it could be. And I
Okay.
saw it last week in the 2019 version of you know, pushing the pile on first down and winding up in 2nd and 3. That they can't be in 2nd and 11. They can't be in 2nd and 8, 9, 2nd and 10, trying to throw on first down and the ball sails or somebody drops it. 2nd and 10's a bad down for them. It really is.
Have they run the ball so consistently that they haven't been in 2nd and 9 a good number of times running the ball? It's
They're not running the ball well enough. I guess that's my point.
sure they need to be better in both. The point is, I think we're debating this and arguing about this, and I think we're still coming from a similar place. The offense needs to be more consistent. We've seen it look great for you know throughout the Detroit game, obviously. We've seen it look really good for other stretches. I mean, you go back and look at how they played in Cincinnati, go back to second half of the Houston game. Certainly, you look at how they played in the second quarter in Cleveland. That's how you want it to look. But yeah, it needs to be more complete. It needs to be more consistent. And I think that for me, if there's something I was disappointed about, it's not the weirdness of the fourth quarter, really. It was the offense against a really bad defense, a defense that couldn't stop the pass or the run. And they didn't really look like that for most of Sunday's game. So, you credit Arizona. I mean, they competed. I don't want to completely be dismissive of them. At the same time, let's not gas up a 1-7 football team that they played. So it is what it is. They went up against a bad team, a bad defense, and their offense certainly did not match what they did against Detroit, which was a really good defense on paper. So it is the NFL. It is a league in which you're chasing consistency. It is a league that you can even look great, as Buffalo did in weeks 2, 3, 4, and then we've seen how the Bills have played since then. It's fleeting. This idea of building to being the best team that you can be, it's not linear. You have ups and downs. You have performances that you're impressed by and performances that you're concerned by. I don't think Sunday really fell into that latter category that much, other than, yeah, I would have liked to have seen the offense build a little bit better off what they did the previous week in going out there and playing a team that, let's face it, again, was a nice story the first few weeks. They had their big upset win over the Cowboys in week 3, but it's not a Cardinals team that had looked very impressive at all since then. The defense through 50 minutes, they look like the Ravens defense, right?
See, we all think the Cowboys are going to the Super Bowl. They actually lost to these guys.
Yeah, sure. And again, look at Buffalo and Kansas City. I mean, look at Kansas City scored 9 points against a Denver defense that a few weeks ago gave up 70 to Miami. I mean, it's crazy. The league's weird.
I went 8-6-1 against the spread before Monday night, but there were buys this week. And I looked up. I'm like, what are the ones I lost in? How did I lose picking Pittsburgh? How did I lose picking Kansas City? I mean, how did I buy in on some of these teams? How did I buy in on Buffalo? You know what I mean? Luke is here. We're going to continue on about the Gus Bus and Roquan Smith and the defense and Mike McDonald and obviously the Seattle Seahawks, who look pretty sharp in those Jim Zorn, Steve Largent, Chris Warren throwbacks as well. We have the trading deadline, Eric DeCosta scoring Roquan Smith this time last year. Lots of things to discuss. Maryland Crab Cake Tour is back on the road next week. It's all brought to you by our friends at the Maryland Lottery. I got my Raven scratch-offs here in the Lucky Batch. Our friends at Window Nation, 866-90-NATION. Buy 2, get 2 free. 0% financing for 5 years now, 866-90-NATION. Go find them. And our friends at Jiffy Lube Multi-Care right around the corner. Fixed our oil last week and fixed yours this week. There's one right. You don't have to go to Merritt Boulevard. There's Jiffy Lube Multi-Cares everywhere. That's my location, though, because I'm a Dundalk guy. Lots to discuss this week, including me taking a couple days off last week and flying away to see you two and trying to have a little bit of fun and visiting my mother's life in South Carolina. So if you're following me on on social media to South Carolina over the weekend, yes, I gained weight last week. I am Nestor. We are WNST, AM 1570, Towson, Baltimore. More ahead on Ravens football with Luke and I. Stay with us on Baltimore Positive.